Okay, and we've been recorded. Let me try to run through some quick slides and just open up some topics for discussion, because as you might imagine, this has become a very topical issue in the last year and a half. Many organizations, not just universities, are moving from their communications and face-to-face because of the pandemic, restricting meetings and meeting face-to-face, moving to online. So there's been a huge shift in this, and people talk about it as the new normal. I don't like that term particularly. I just want to say that for us, for me certainly, this was normal long ago, long before. The first online course that I taught was in 1993, for example. So some of the students actually weren't even born when we started doing some of this online teaching. Oh, what is that? Somebody coming in? Oh. Somebody's trying to get hold of me. We'll just ignore them. So in terms of what we're looking at, why is online learning, I think, can be better than face-to-face? No, get rid of that. Oh, sorry.
Hello.
Sorry about that. That's someone trying to get hold of me. This is one of the dangers of being online all the time. It means you're actually, while you're at work, you're available all the time, and people just drop into your desktop from nowhere. In terms of actually what we're talking about, I think online learning can be much better than face-to-face. It's not just as good at it. It's not a poor substitute. Many people have come to online education because they've been forced into doing it, and so they're doing it very last minute. They're using techniques that are not really very good. They're using teachers and lecturers who are not experienced with this, and they're trying to do online what they would normally do face-to-face. You have to change slightly different styles of delivery, slightly different ways of actually presenting your information, slightly different interaction with students as you go through. But I think there are many advantages. In terms of, why is that not okay?
If you want to just, Frank, you can just message her back to your.
No, we'll just ignore it. She'll call me back later. I think one of the key things about this is the flexibility of time, and that's illustrated very well just now, because I mean, you know, you're looking at 1 o'clock or just after 1 o'clock in Mauritius time. It's only after 9 o'clock in the morning here, so I've just had my breakfast, walked the dog, and I'm just about to start the day, and now you can link in with ease. The beauty of this is that the students can actually quite often be working these days at the same time, so they can join things. They can join their class at midnight, they can do it in the afternoon, they can do it at weekends and holidays and times like that. So it's much more flexible, rather than having to turn up at the time, 9 o'clock class, be there or you miss it. The beauty of things like just now, we're recording this and we can use that. You can listen to it again and again. The flexibility of time is a huge advantage in doing this, and there's no reason at all why you have to make people have that class. Traditionally, we had these classes timetabled for lecture theatre at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday, and everybody went there. But actually, with new technology, there's no reason why you have to do that, and it's a huge advantage not to be able to do that. I think the other thing is you're looking at, there's a huge availability. This is the library behind me in my house. This is part of the collection. This is my non-fiction collection. The other rooms are full of books and novels and whatnot as well. But I think one of the things about our university in Scotland here is that the University of the Highlands and Islands, we're scattered over across 12 different academic colleges over a huge geographical distance. And so the physical books like this, the paper books there that we have in the library, are only a very small part of what we're talking about. We have access to hundreds of thousands of journals that can be accessed online at a click, in the middle of the night, in the middle of the afternoon, from your desk. You can get the latest journal downloaded. Some of these are open access books that are free. Others the university subscribe to and buy. You have ebooks that you can use, and many people can use them all at the one time. So it's not just a question. When I was a student, like a long time ago, When a lecturer said, you know, go and read this chapter in this certain book, you had to get out and run, go to the library and try and get it there first before your classmates got there and got the book out, because otherwise you'd have to wait until they return it till you read it. Actually, with the online library, multiple people can read this all at the one time. You can read the thing, you can download the chapter you want, and then print it out and read it in the bus on the way home. So there's a whole variety of things you can do with your library on demand. So the flexibility that's encouraged by putting your stuff online is a huge change. You also get access to multi-mode resources. So you get access to video clips, you get access to textbooks, you get access to journals, you can get access to podcasts and audio files. So in many cases, I've just done a podcast last week, in fact, relating to another book I'm working on just now. And the advantage of that is you don't need to see me to hear what I have to say. I can record that, you can download it, and you can listen to it on your smartphone and with earphones as you travel into work. And so by recording these things, you might get multiple different perceptions of these things. And the beauty of doing that with online education is we can take 4 or 5 people talking about the one subject, and they'll have 4 or 5 different interpretations, 4 or 5 different ways of explaining this, 4 or 5 different things that accentuate what they think is important about this particular topic. And it's not that one is right and one is wrong, they just have different ways of looking at it. So the student can actually benefit by getting access to all of these things, rather than just turning up in my class in the lecture theatre to hear my view of the world. And we can hear multiple ways of thinking about these things. You can also organize tutorials by schedule. So I've just before we started here, I was busy organizing. I have some students that are working through on their dissertation stage just now. They're all working at the same time. And so I was able to send them an invitation, discuss with them when was the best time for them, which day and what time of the day was best for them to link in and catch these things as they go through. Somebody else trying to get hold of me. This is obviously very popular today. Sorry about this. The idea of being able to schedule your tutorial in advance means that you can get the student when they're ready for it, rather than turning up and the student's feeling tired, the student's not feeling very well, they want to try and get the best time of the day. They can look at this and find a time that suits them within their diary. Perhaps during the pandemic, for example, when some people had to take their children to school and pick up their children from school, and school classes were disorganized or rearranged and whatnot, people were able to say, well, I can't manage to get to that particular time. Can I do it an hour later? I can take my children to school and then come back, get the computer, and then I can have quiet, peace and quiet in the house to get my session. So you can organize these things in a much more. Now, obviously, you can. It means that you might have multiple different sessions with these things, but you can also say that there's watch this video, take notes, and then 2 days later, join me at 10 o'clock in the morning and we'll discuss it all together. And so you can begin to schedule these things that are much more available, not just dependent on having a classroom available on the campus that you can bring students into. You can do much more in terms of actually making this more flexible. A huge advantage over the last year that people have noticed is that you avoid huge travel costs. So I used to travel in, for example, I live about half an hour drive from the local college, the campus. I used to have to drive across to my office, switch on my computer and do this sort of thing from a desk in there, spend the day there and then drive home again. Now I can do it straight from home because access to the campus was restricted during the pandemic. I can do it all from home. I save 5 hours travel a week. 5 hours, I don't have to actually be sitting in a car driving to and from work, and I can do it straight from home. I realize it's not for everybody because some people don't have space in their house and they have young children and other things that distract them from attention. I'm fortunate in that respect that I have a space in the house. My children are grown up and they're not living in the house anymore, so I have a nice quiet time apart from people that try to call me on the computer just now. So that in terms of being able to do it, I have 5 hours extra a week during the working hours that I didn't have before that I can do for other things. So there's a huge advantage in that. Over the course of the last year and a half, I think I've been given talks in 15, 16 different countries, and I haven't left this chair. So I'm able to join them in Ireland or join you in Mauritius and do these things without having to drive. Now, in many cases, if you were going to be there, you'd be there for 1 or 2 days perhaps, but you might spend a day traveling each way. So even for me to go 1 hour into Glasgow or London or Edinburgh to go and give a talk means that that's 2 days that I take. I have to be half a day to get there, and then do the thing, and then maybe come back the next day. And so you're 2 days away for 1 hour talk. Now I can just actually switch onto this thing and deliver the talk from here. The thing is, I think you have to find that, so it blurs these geographic distinctions. This is obviously the case in point. We're looking at different time zones, you and I just now, but we're able to link in. It gets more difficult if you get further away, of course, and people are in the middle of the night when you're in the middle of the afternoon, the middle of the day. But it gives you that flexibility to play around with some of these things, and actually you're not restricted by the walls of your classroom. You're not restricted by the building you happen to be sitting in. You can speak to students, and indeed, colleagues, fellow lecturers, fellow researchers and whatnot in different parts of the world, and get the benefit of their sharing their experience as well, much more easily. You can record it as we're doing just now, and you can drop these things onto, this is an example of one of our modules. You can record these and drop them into the module. So you give the talk once, you do it well, you like it, you've had it recorded, you don't have to do that exact thing again. You can say to the students, watch this talk, just like a television program, and then we'll discuss it. Then we can find out what you like, what you don't like, what the best things are, what the problem areas are, and we can focus our learning activity on understanding the problems. If you watch the video, if you watch my talk and you understand it all completely, great. I don't have to go over that again. We can move on to something else that you find more difficult, and we can spend that time. So it's a true way of actually learning and playing to the strengths of the student, rather than making everybody learn at the same pace with the same thing at the same time, the fast learners and the slow learners. It means you can add in learning resources to different things. You can drop in information, whether they're going to be, read this chapter, read this book, this paper, watch this video. There's a whole range of things you can do. You can create the areas where they go to for their assessments, for their assignments, and they might be, I'll show you in a second too. I've got the summative assessments that they get their grade with, but also formative assessments, assessments that they can use to develop and improve their skill. And they don't even have to be marked by me. They can do the assessment, see how difficult, how easy they find it, and then actually ask questions and solve problems that are based on the different student experience of doing these assessments, doing these tests. So it's a way of like doing tests for yourself to actually reassure the student that they are making progress and they do understand the topic, and knowing then what they find more difficult that we can then concentrate and focus on and improve that part of their education, rather than trying to make everybody do everything the same all of the time. You can add in things like further reading materials, and that means that the slow learners can just focus on the main information that you send up, but the quick learners can get extra things that you have not got time to cover in the classroom session. So they can read other things in more depth, week by week on different topics. If something new comes out tomorrow, then I can actually copy that or get the digital version of that and add it in here, so you can update your course constantly. Unlike when you produce a book, when you publish a book, that's it, between two covers. That's the finished version. If you discover something new the following week, you don't want to scrap the book, rewrite that new chapter, add it in again, make a new book. You'll have to wait until maybe a year or 2 years before that second edition comes out to bring that book up to date. When it's online, you can do that all the time, right away. It's very, very simple. It's got a different cost structure. It's not cheaper, and it's not necessarily more expensive, but it costs more upfront to do proper design and proper research to produce the resources that you need for the course. However, having done that, having put the effort in advance, it doesn't matter if you have 10 students or 1,000 students. They can all get access to the same thing. If you're doing this face-to-face, and you have a classroom that takes 10 or 12 people, and you suddenly get 40 people turning up for the class, you need 4 classrooms, or you need to reschedule that 4 times. When it's online, you don't. You can say, this is what we do. We have problem solving sessions at another time. Come to that if you have a problem. So there's a different cost structure. It depends. I try to use open learning, open education resources as much as possible. So many, if not most of them, are free. And then you have a cost perhaps in the software that you use to access this. Even if you use something that's open source like Moodle, for example, you'll have a cost because you'll need to have technicians that are available to service it and deal with problems and answer questions and keep the thing running and maintained and updated and so on. So there is a cost, but there's also a cost in having the physical building you have to look after and keep open and keep dry and keep, you know, maintain the building. So there's a huge cost. One of the results of the whole pandemic and people moving to teach online and to teach from home or to teach from learning centers is that we're now having to rethink what is the purpose of the buildings on our university campus. We suddenly have many, many more buildings and much more space than we actually need. How can we use that? Do we sell them off or do we use it for something else? It's a problem that we never thought we would have, but now actually it's a different situation because so many people have moved to the online version. It also enables things like contingency planning. If your class is cancelled because of COVID, then you can move online. You can move the sessions. It allows you to actually have that backup. If a student is ill and they can't get into the class, they have not missed that lesson. They haven't missed that class. They can go on to the online site and get the information. If a member of staff leaves or is off ill for a long time, somebody else has to step in and teach that class. Rather than starting from scratch and having to redesign the course and relearn the course, all the information is there. They just have to familiarize themselves with the lessons before they actually go to the class, if that's their subject area, and they can pick it up from there. So it's a great safety net to make sure that these things are not just solely dependent on the one person. Quite often we plan these things very, very tightly, that there's a specialist, that someone delivers this module every year, this particular course every year, and if that person's not teaching it, who's going to do it? And then if you suddenly get that thrust upon you, you have to go and learn that causes extra stresses and strains while you're getting up to speed to teach that module that you haven't taught before. This is a great way to plan for emergency situations. And I think also it facilitates pedagogy, self-determined learning. And this is a great strength for me. I mean, we talk about pedagogy. Pedagogy is really learning with children. When we're talking about how adults learn, we really should talk about andragogy, because adults come with different experiences to young children. Adults have been through education, they have life experiences, they have different issues and problems, they have partners, they have children, they have parents to look after or whatever. They've got a whole range of issues, busy days, busy schedules, you know, limited resources. There's a whole range of things that they approach education differently. So pedagogy is for children, andragogy for adults, and heutagogy is for anybody, because it actually puts the power of learning with the student. So the student can actually say, I want to learn more about this aspect of the course. And they're not dependent upon you saying, well, I don't want to teach that aspect of the course. This is more fascinating. This is more important to me. What you can teach is a whole variety of the background to the course. And then over time, you can go into in depth in different areas so that different students on the same program, on the same module, will be able to get different experiences that suit them. If they've covered some of these things already, or if they understand one aspect quite more quickly than their neighbor, for example, they will move on faster than that. And they will spend some time on another part of the course that they find more difficult, that their neighbor finds much more easy to understand. And so you can almost customize the course for individual students in a way that is really impossible in a face-to-face. You just haven't got the time and you haven't got the space to go and do that with a face-to-face class. So I'll share this presentation again on the SlideShare site if anybody wants to go through that, and I'll open up for questions just now. I'm quite happy to deal any aspect of questions that we've talked about here, about why I think it's more flexible, why I think it's better to use that, why I think it's more easy to develop. We'll touch on some of the styles, if you like, some of the issues to try and do that. And I'm quite happy to answer or try to answer any aspect of that whatsoever. So back to you, I guess. Do you want to chair this, Dorothy, or do we just wave when people want to speak? I'm in your hands.
Okay, so thank you very much, Frank, for your presentation. I mean, there are quite some interesting points that have been highlighted and things that we have to think quite a lot about what the future of higher education would be. You talked about building, what's the purpose of us having a huge building? So what can we do about these spaces? And also you talk about the self-determined learning, which is what we are trying to, we have been with a new learner-centered system to put more emphasis on that. And I think we've got students here who are still struggling with that. And these are good points that you have addressed. So I think I'll leave the floor. For those who want to ask question, you may either raise your hand or you can type your question in the chat box. So we've got around 5 minutes, I think, before we start the next presentation. Anyone?
So any evidence the students, you said there's a chat. Question in the chat here. Any evidence that your use of technology has an educational influence in the learning of the student? Yes, we have a huge amount of evidence on this because students are telling us quite often that they are now able to, particularly mature students, more adult students, they're able to return to education in a way that they could not do if they had to actually do it face to face. If they had to get up and go into a class at 10 o'clock in the morning or travel to a place that was distant from where they're based, they could not do that. The very fact that they're able to access this in a much more flexible manner, it's interesting. People often they give you mixed signals that come back. They say, if you had a choice to doing this, you know, what's your preferred method of learning? Oh, I like to learn face to face. I'd rather learn face to face than learn online. And then you say, okay, so if this was made available face to face, would you actually, you know, would you join that class? And they go, oh no, I couldn't do that. Why couldn't you do that? Well, I've got children to look after. I've got work to go to. And so they like the idea. They think that face to face is the gold standard of education. That is not true. There are certain things that face to face is very good for, and certain things that face to face is bad for. I mean, I'm by training a natural scientist. I did geology at university, for example, and to, you know, that a strong part of that is field science, is getting on your boots and your jacket and going out into the field to look at things outside in on the mountains and so on. And that can be a wonderful experience to learn geology in the field. But if it's a horrible day and it's pouring rain and the rain's coming in your neck and out your back and whatnot, it's miserable, it's horrible. That's not a good learning experience. If you can record that and get a good video and you can show the students that, and you can pause that, you can stop, you can annotate it, you can talk about it, they can watch it again afterwards and listen to it, so that if they missed a point, they can see it more differently. There's a whole variety of education of things there. So we have a huge amount of evidence. Yeah.
We've got one question here.
Yeah. Somebody here saying that a 10-year-old, the teacher says they didn't believe in online education for young ones. I think that is nonsense as well. I think that, so I was speaking to a head teacher in Scotland just a few months ago during the pandemic. And I said, how is it going for you? And he says it's going really well. This is a new school, and they have invested heavily in building the school and in the use of technology. And he said, if you had told me 1 year ago that we would give the children a tablet and send them home and continue their education as if nothing had happened, I would think you were crazy. I would think it couldn't be done. But that's what we have done. That's what we have done. because they've changed it. And the technology is only part of it, because I think a strong part of it is changing the culture, changing the way you think about this, changing the way that you design interaction for that on an online environment. And he actually made a point that I wasn't aware of before. He said, in this particular school, there are a number of school pupils who are what they call attention deficit, they can be quite disruptive in the classroom. They like attention. They like to talk, and they like to they like the attention. And he said, we've discovered that in this new online mode, they're actually doing better than they were sitting in the classroom, because they have the focus of the screen in front of them. And he said, if we go back to what we did before, after this pandemic, these children will have a worse experience. And so what we're talking about now is developing among my colleagues a hybrid experience. So it might not be fully face-to-face, and it might not be fully online, but we have elements of both that play to the strength of both of these systems and both of these ideas. And so you may, for example, have, rather than turning up and giving a lecture like this in a classroom to 100 students or whatever, you might actually record this and do a really polished performance. You can stop it, you can bring in diagrams and photographs and illustrations, and you can say to students, this video is 20 minutes long. Watch this when you have a chance, whenever you want, watch this video. And then next week, we will have a face-to-face class for those who don't understand that, or who have problems with that, or who have questions, or who are more interested in this topic. And so when you have the class, it is much more interactive, and you don't have to actually do exactly the same as you would do in the face-to-face class, the face-to-face sense. It's a way of actually experimenting this hybrid model that gives you things much more differently. What I like to do with I don't believe in learning styles. This nonsense about people have a different learning style and they should learn in that style, that has been shown by research to be a lot of nonsense. It sounds very attractive, but it's not true. But what is true is that we all learn in different ways at different times. Sometimes we learn well by sitting down to read something. Sometimes we need to do it. If you're baking a cake, for example, you can read about baking a cake, but you don't know if you can make a good cake until you actually roll up your sleeves and get the flour and start making a cake. You have to experiment. You have to do this and do live. And so you might find that by watching a video of someone making a cake, a chef demonstrating a meal to you, you'll understand more than if you just listen to the podcast of them talking it through that, because you have a visual impression of what it looks like, how small you have to chop the onions. You get an idea. And so we learn differently in different ways at different times. And I'm a strong believer in designing your online material to try and have different ways of learning that. So there will be a presentation like this. There might be a set of automated PowerPoint slides that you can watch without someone, because I can do a voiceover on those slides, for example. I can just record a voiceover. You can look at these. I like to have an example of what I'm talking about, so people can actually understand the theory and then look at a real example of what it means in practice. I like the idea of video clips. Many people don't realize that if you go on to look at YouTube and get something that's really good in YouTube, if you go into YouTube education, you get a different set of priorities that are specifically organized for education. They're specifically selected for use in educational, in that technology situation. It may well be different levels of education. So some of the videos are suitable for primary children, some are for secondary children, some are for adults, and so on and so forth. But there's a whole range of things of what you're doing. There's a whole range of things that we're doing. I see a really good question at the end here that about the issues of inequality of infrastructure and so on. That is a really good issue. There are different ways of doing that. I've done a lot of this activity and working with this in Asia. And there are different ways of doing things. If you have your learning resources online in this manner with different folders and different activities and video clips and podcasts and so on, you don't have to access it online. You can actually zip all that, put it on a USB and give them the USB. They plug the USB into their computer and they think they're online until they actually need to be online. And they may need to be online only for email, which is very, very little bandwidth required for that, because everything is driven from a hard drive, from an external drive. You can print out these things, obviously, and see there are new technology now that you can zip all these things up and take all of your lecture notes and produce a little book out of it. And so you can actually buy print on demand. I ran a big project, 3-year project, looking at universities' e-publishing service to try to create free or very, very cheap books in an electronic format, just by zipping up what we already know, not creating anything new, but just what we know and writing, but designing it in a way that brings it together and shows it off, showcases it best, rather than just taking a big cardboard box and saying, here's all my lecture notes. Do you make sense of that? So I think different ways at different times. And the infrastructure is a big issue. Some of the more modern ones can be, students are accessing these things on their smartphones. Personally, I would hate that. I would hate to do the course looking at my phone. It takes me all my time to send me texts. I have to put my specs on to send texts back and forward to my children, because the screen is so small for me. But if that works for you, that's fine. If you can get a cheap, and we've been buying a lot of laptops and tablets, lending them to students, giving them to students, putting them in the libraries. Students can go and borrow a laptop like a book. They can go in and just borrow it, use it, do their lesson, put it back and get charged again. Some institutions are looking at now actually bulk buying some very, very cheap bottom of the range tablets, because they don't need to be very fancy. They don't have to do a whole software. They just have to have internet access and some basic interaction of, like Word facilities and so on, and giving that to the students at the start of the course, because the accountant writes these things off after 3 or 4 years anyway. And if you're a university student for 3 or 4 years, by the time you've finished, this is old technology now, so that you're not actually losing very much. The idea of actually using that as a resource in the same way as you would, be given a pencil or a school book, a jotter. When you go to school, you get a jotter to write in. You get a laptop now. You get a tablet instead as it goes through.
Yeah. Okay. So I think, Frank, thank you for. I think we've got some interesting questions, which probably we can carry on during our roundtable. Maybe it will extend to the discussion during the roundtable as well. What I'll do now, I think we'll move on to the next presentation, because so that we can start the roundtable around more or less the same time. So thank you again, Frank, and you're with us because you're also in the roundtable. So you, if you want, you can go and have a coffee and then come back. That's fine with us. Okay. So thank you. Okay. So I'll leave now. I think Dr. Bado, you're going to present the speaker for the next presentation. Okay.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Hope you can hear me. So welcome to our annual virtual research week. Today, we have only one presenter, Mr. Gulshan Ramsaran, and he will be presenting his research project entitled Investigating Teachers' 21st Century Skill in Producing History and Geography Video Lesson for Grade 5 during the 2020 COVID-19 confinement. Just a quick description of Mr. Gulshan. He's a primary school teacher, and he has been in this field for over 20 years. So what we have done is we have recorded the presentation of Mr. Gulshan, and I will request my colleague, Dr. Dorothy, to just play the video. And then just after that, we will take the question and answer. Mr. Gulshan is of course will attend the questions. So thank you.
Yes, Gulshan is around for presentation. You can unmute later on when we have questions. So I'm just going to share the. So.
Hello, everybody. I am Gulshan Ramsaran, primary school educator at Calbas Government School and a student at the Center for Innovative and Lifelong Learning, along with Dr. Dorothy Kushnanaik, lecturer at Cill. I am presenting this abstract entitled Investigating Teachers' 21st Century Skills in Producing History and Geography Video Lessons for Grade 5 during the 2020 COVID-19 confinement. I hope you enjoy the presentation. Thank you. The presentation consists of the background to introduce the subject and the purpose of the study, a brief literature review of the area being investigated, the methodology adopted, the results, the conclusion, the recommendations, and finally the acknowledgements part. The education sector in Mauritius was not spared by COVID-19 pandemic in 2020. Schools were closed during the confinement period, and with a view to help students keep in touch with their studies, after consultations between all partners of the education sector, authorities decided that the most appropriate way to reach all students was through educational video lessons that would be broadcast on channels of the national television. So, teachers were invited to show interest on a voluntary basis to produce video lessons at home. A group of 7 teachers was involved in producing grade 5 history and geography video lessons, which were vetted, aired, and appreciated, and officially acknowledged by the Ministry of Education. Despite an atmosphere imbibed with emotional, psychological, social, familial, and professional disturbances, the lessons were successfully achieved. Going through extreme and unprecedented circumstances like the COVID-19 pandemic can trigger different responses in the professional life of a teacher. Instead of being passive consumers, some teachers decided to seize the opportunity and stepped in uncharted waters to become producers of valuable multimedia teaching resources. In this context, history and geography video lessons for grade 5 pupils. The aim of this study was to understand whether the teachers as video producers demonstrated 21st century skills. Furthermore, it intended to be a record of history to show how valuable digital resources were created within a virtual network by exploring roles of all resource persons and tools involved. The research questions this study intended to answer were: 1. What were the skills and tools needed, mastered, and used by primary school educators to produce video lessons on history and geography during the 2020 COVID-19 confinement period? 2. Did the teachers already have the skills, knowledge, and mastery of the tools, or did they develop these in the process of producing the video lessons? 3. Who were the different actors who formed part of the network, and how did they contribute to the pre-production, production, post-production, until the broadcasting of the lessons by the national broadcasting station? And 4. What were the challenges encountered by the teachers, and how did they overcome these difficulties? Educators and educational establishments have been forced to reinvent education, more online learning, flexibility, tapping on digital tools, increasing access. World Economic Forum 2020. Teachers should have the ability to identify online resources, Mar et al., 2012. The COVID-19 pandemic has challenged educators to adjust educational approaches to accommodate online teaching practices while providing opportunities to innovate and design video content that enhances accessibility and engagement. Castillo, 2021. Videos started to be used in the educational field during the 1980s. Simo et al. 2009 stated that the internet helped video evolve to the extent of being considered as a teaching methodology. Stoffer 2020 presents 21st century skills as 12 abilities that one needs to succeed in any career during the information age. The 12 skills are classified in three categories, namely learning skills, literacy skills, and life skills. Activity theory framework was considered for this study. In 2004, Buell stated that the lens of activity theory can provide perceptions on how teaching is reorganized when a new technological instrument becomes part of teachers' educational activity. Wisk and Spicer, 2010, explained that activity theory can illustrate activities such as teacher training and in-service professional growth as dynamic, complex, and self-organizing systems, thus viewing activity as a potential generator of both individual and organizational learning. This makes full sense considering the environment and situation in which the teachers were evolving in terms of learning and professional growth during the pandemic. For the methodology, exploratory research using the activity theory and the Strom 1987 model was adopted. Qualitative in nature, the study used online semi-structured questionnaires to gather data from a group of 7 teachers who produced history and geography video lessons. The procedure consisted of contacting participants through social media apps, inviting them to fill their questionnaires, and be at their disposal for any clarifications. The data collected was then organized in terms of charts and headings consisting of biographical details, motivation, logistic tools, video production, and support network. A thematic analysis of the data allowed for themes related to 21st century skills to emerge. These were further analyzed and discussed using the activity theory framework components, namely the object, the subject, the community, the division of labor, the instruments, the rules, and the outcome. This diagram gives an overview how the activity theory is used as an analytical framework in this study. The subjects are the participants, that is, the teachers. The object is a video lesson. Instruments are the logistic and tools used. Community is a support from institutions involved, along with family and peer support. Division of labor defines the roles of each actor in the whole process. The rules component is divided into technical and specific requirements, and also the panoply of skills demonstrated by teachers. The outcome is a consolidation of skills demonstrated and the creation of online channels around the videos. The responses from the questionnaire was coded and themes emerged were categorized under the 21st century skills. During the production of the videos, teachers demonstrated several skills, some of which they already had and some which they developed. Here we can see some extracts from the responses of the participants when asked about the skills and or competencies they developed and mastered during the production of the videos. Here we can discover how the activity theory uses tensions between components along with their fixers to prove their connections and interdependency. For example, some videos were rejected by the Mauritius Institute of Education for not respecting copyright. Fixers were that teachers became more cautious and searched for free-to-use images and videos. Some made their own images and video demonstrations. Another tension was between subject matter expert and teacher on concepts wrongly explained and incorrect use of vocabulary. So teachers did more research to satisfy the needs. The third example is about conflict between instruments and subject, and fixers was mastery in using the apps through self-learning and network support. The activity theory as an analytical framework clearly displayed the connections, interdependency, and contradictions of all components and thus helped to efficiently answer the research questions about skills tapped upon by the teachers and roles of various actors in the video production process. The findings of the research showed that 21st century skills were indeed manifested in terms of leadership, teamwork, mastery of digital tools, communication skills, flexibility, adaptability, patriotism, responsibility, and accountability, amongst others, by the teachers who produced the video resources. Furthermore, the roles and involvement of institutions and resource persons in the whole process were pictured, thus supporting the need for a teacher as a digital content producer to be part of a professional network. Recommendations involve further studies to test efficacy of the video lessons. Similar studies can be carried out for other subjects and grades. Video production can be introduced as a module in teacher training. Teachers can be provided with courses on intellectual property rights. Video production workshops can be made available as in-job training, and incentives such as allowances, free internet, and or credit facilities for educators come video producers to purchase computer series properly configured for
Ok,
video.
allez, ce noir moi bien. Mais tu crois moi pour capable.
I am thankful for the help and collaboration of Dr. Dorothy Kushna Naik. Thankful to all participants who responded positively. Thankful to all persons involved at Cill and UM, and my family members for their precious support. On the right, you can see the link to a Facebook group, History and Geography Grade 5 video lessons, that hosts some of the educational video lessons. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Gulshan. While we're waiting for Dr. Bahadur to come back, um, uh, I think it was a very good presentation, which really presents what we are, what we have gone through, what our students have gone through in the Mauritian context. So thank you for your presentation. We will now take some questions for you. I think you've already seen, yeah, exactly.
Yes.
You've
So I've seen
already
the question about how the
from
has activity been used to generate
Whitehead, Professor
from Dr.
From Professor Whitehead.
Whitehead, Jack Whitehead. Okay. So how has activity theory been used to generate an evidence-based and valid explanation of a teacher's educational influence in the learning of a student? As I have said in the recommendations, in this study, we didn't look at how the video lessons help the students. It was mainly about teachers and how were they able to use 21st century skills to produce these videos. So in the recommendations, we have said that the SAMR model can be used, therefore substitution, augmentation, modification, and redefinition, in order to further explore how these video lessons were able to help the Mauritian children. So it would be for a part of another study. I hope I have answered your question.
Professor Whitehead?
Yes, it's just that I'm really fascinated by the use of the technology, and especially where you say can help the children. And I don't think my question is easy to answer, but I think we've got to show how the technology has had an educational influence. So, yeah, the teacher's use of the technology is educational only if I think it actually should be shown to influence the learning of the students, and not only the learning, but with the values of what I call human flourishing. Because if it's educational, it's values laden. And I think we need to include within our analysis of skills also those values. But that was really enjoyable. Many thanks indeed for your presentation.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Professor.
I think, I mean, Jack is right on that aspect of the influence of the teacher on the learning. So I guess, as Gulshan said, it was a project done in the context of the BAC, so it was quite limited, and they did that project in a context which was very, very difficult for all students with the confinement and then lockdowns and having to do online all of a sudden. And I mean, we do have intention to move. I guess Gulshan can maybe add that today itself, since schools have, so Gulshan, can you just
schools have already been closed again in Mauritius, and I have already been contacted once more, and to join another team to produce video lessons. And well, we are joining the team. Once we get some names, those names are going to be submitted to the Ministry of Education, and from there they're going to contact revert back to us, and another system will be set in place in order to produce some more video lessons. But this time they told me that maybe we will be invited to the Open University or the Mauritius Institute of Education, because there's no restriction to leave the house. So maybe we'll go there and use their professional studios for the recordings.
And I think that gives us an opportunity now maybe to have a research carried out following 2 years of implementation of video lesson being broadcasted on television on all these aspects about how is it impacting on learning, how the teachers is being the influence of the teachers are. This could be a good data gathering. We have participants, so we have the opportunity to look into that. Yeah, I think if Daniela is, can she mute her phone? I'm trying to get her to mute, but yeah, okay. So any Sandy, can you just move on?
Yeah, I think there was a comment from Karen. It will take time for us to really decide whether our interventions have been of educational influence or not. So Karen, do you want to come in here, please?
Yes, I have another question, actually. I mean, we've been trying to do a similar, thing in Eswatini, where we also made some TV sessions. I'm wondering what quality assurance steps did you put in place? Because I'm very happy to get the creativity of the teachers going, but there needs to be some form of, maybe national quality assurance for interventions like these. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Paul, do you want to perhaps
I think
Paul had
Gulshan was trying to.
So when the teachers were asked to produce the videos at home, they were uploaded to a site, and from there it was sent to the subject matter expert of the Mauritius Institute of Education, where they would look at the videos and find the mistakes, or maybe in the content or grammatical mistakes, or maybe the sound, or so they were looking at the technical mistakes plus content mistake and subject mistakes that may have occurred. So it was a vetting team. So they were having a look at it, and they were sending back the videos to the teachers and telling them where to do the corrections, where to correct the mistakes. And then these videos were reworked out and then resent to them. And at times, a video maybe had to be reworked for 5 times until it was finally accepted and vetted by the subject matter experts at the Mauritius Institute of Education. And it's only after this exercise that it was sent to the national broadcasting station to be aired online.
So I think
so this was
okay. So did they have a framework, Goshan? Did they use a particular rubric to a checklist to see about quality? Did they use
they were using the national national curriculum framework. I remember myself, I was working on one video for grade 5, and then I wanted to give some extra answers. So I checked for some answers in a grade 6 book, and I had included it in the video. And so they came back to me and told me, no, you can't bend the step, the les étapes comme si. So they asked me to remove whatever I had put for grade 6 in the grade 5 videos and use the content of grade 5 school books, the textbooks, in order to explain that particular text, topic.
Okay.
So the national curriculum framework was being used.
Okay. So have things improved? Do you think that now when you're going to be doing your video lessons again, are there any changes that you have observed?
I think
I guess access is easier now. I remember last year they had to hide from the police because you weren't allowed to, if you didn't have a pass, you were not able
Yes.
to drive. And a
Because
lot of
the work
teachers
access
actually
permit, I think,
braved
yes.
the work access permit, exactly, the WAP. And a lot of teachers braved this rule to go and, present at the Open University. And I think that was very commendable on a lot of teachers. They really had the students at heart. Yeah, so great. That I think we can carry on now. We'll go to the next part of this research week at Cill. I'm very pleased to be presenting our roundtable presenters. So we have Professor. So in purely alphabetical order, just going to be presenting them. So there's no ranking at all. So Professor Karen Ferreira-Meyers, she lives and works at Eswatini. She's the coordinator of linguistics and modern languages at the Institute of Distance Education, and she publishes regularly in OER, distance education, and loves to post a lot of status messages on WhatsApp, which I obviously follow. And she loves translating and interpreting too. So that was Karen. And then we have Paul Prinsloo. So Professor Paul Prinsloo is research professor in open distance learning at the University of South Africa. His academic background includes fields as diverse as theology, art history, business management, online learning, religious studies. So eventually a very transdisciplinary personality and very, fun-loving person who I was very privileged to know. Professor Frank Rennie, he was our external examiner. So previously he has been with the University of Mauritius, as Jack has also been. And his research focus on new opportunities for distance open education, computer-based distributed learning systems. He also has a transdisciplinary aspect, as he has also been in geology and sustainable rural development. So Frank has written many books and many about online education, environmental issues. We also are very pleased to have Dr. Isabel Tarling. She's a lecturer in research methodology. She's the director of Limina, and that's a very entrepreneurial spirit. She's also developing a range of technology integration courses at Malawi, and in collaboration with the IDRC on assessing research excellence for various science granting councils across Africa. So, and last but not least, Professor Jack Whitehead, who you have already seen. He's a visiting professor of education. He's a living educational theorist. He has written many books also on living action research. And his recent research has focused on the use of digitalized video data and explanations of educational influences, hence the many questions on educational influence, in continuing professional development in the range of workplaces. So thank you, our eminent guests for this roundtable. We will first listen to you, and eventually then we can come back and we've prepared a Mentimeter session also so that we can get to know, but I think, would you prefer that we get to know who are the people who are listening to us? Because I know a lot of our students are here, and they also are very pleased to, be participating. So you tell me, would you prefer that we run the Mentimeter now, or do you want to, go ahead first? So it's up to you. I mean, we can do whichever. Paul, Frank, would you want to perhaps know about the audience? Mostly are from Mauritius, and we also have students from Seychelles. We also have some guests from South Africa, and some names that I don't know. So it would be perhaps good to know who all are here. So would you want to do the round table first, or? I mean, I'm open to suggestions.
I think
Sandy, let's do the Mentimeter.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, great.
So
Okay.
I'll give Nidhi the floor to share.
Vidi would run the Mentimeter. If you all have your phones ready, we will have a link where you will have some questions. So could we? Vidi, are you okay?
Is she here?
Yeah, Vidi is here.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's on chat. She's
okay.
Okay, so you can share your screen, Vidi, and you can start the Mentimeter activity. We'll all do it together with you. So if you could all connect to menti.com and use the code as above. So Menti. 166-806-8006. Okay, so we'll wait for a few seconds that we see people who've joined. You okay? Yeah. Is everybody able to log on to the system? So if you can just send a chat, I'll just put the code perhaps on the chat session also, so you can really can just copy and paste on the chat so that people can just click on the link. Thanks. Ready to go. We'll just wait for everybody to log on. We have 20 participants. Okay, so it's Menti. You just need to log on to menti.com and type in the code or copy paste the code. Oh, cool. We have only 6 participants.
I don't think you've got just 6. These are 6 people.
Yeah, people are liking.
Not,
Okay.
you must be having more.
Nobody
So
should have seen.
I think you can start so that.
Yeah. Okay. See.
When
Oh, thank you. Thank you all for liking. Those of you who are in, please like, so we know you're in. 13. Thank you. Okay, I think we can start then. That's great, Frank. Yeah, they are real students with real problems. Okay, so could you just tell us where you're from? Um, Mom. That's nice. We have deputy. I'm a student. We have educators. We have professors. Academics. Okay. Lecture in physics. We have education technologists. Great. Okay, I think we can go to the next question. Thank you everyone for giving us a bit brief background of where you're from. Okay. And next. So COVID-19 poses serious concerns to global education systems. What should be our main research focus areas? So you have some drop-down menus, and we'll obviously have, you can select as many as you want, and there are 5 options. So you can just Okay, so we have a tie nearly with teaching and learning processes. There's not much about curriculum change. There's some about policies. Sorry we didn't have the music on. We thought it might have some resonance with everybody else. So I think some music would be nice here. And we can't really see all the options. We need to change the color. Okay, so changes in learning processes seem to be main focus areas that the people are interested in. We can go to the next question. Thank you, Vidhi. Okay. Are you on full screen? Yeah. Okay. So which of the following aspects of your classes can you manage remotely? So here you need to rank. Which are the easiest things that you can do to manage your classes online? Okay. Great. So tailored instructions were easiest to implement, I would say. Then mentoring, teaching and learning progress, then group activities, embedding meaningful assignments, and grading assignments fairly and equitably. And incorporating discussions and group activities. Okay, so I'd like to see educational. What was that comment? So, yeah. So monitoring teaching and learning process was easily, I would say, the one that was most accessible to the participants here. And the least one was about incorporating discussions and group activities. Okay, great. So can we go to the next? Thank you. Are you showing the results? Great. Okay, thank you. So the statement here is that COVID-19 did not break the system. It showed the cracks in the system. What were the greatest hurdles you faced during teaching and learning during COVID-19 or during the lockdown period? So this is an open-ended question. So you can just enter any of the problems that you faced, any issues. Or perhaps you don't agree with the statement. Thank you. Good. Accessing needy students, active participation, mental health stability, pupils motivation. What about teacher motivation? Fear of the unknown. Yes, sitting down too much. That's true. Sedentarity. Coping mechanism. Setting exam papers. Oh, wow. Can we zoom in, Vidi? Can we zoom in onto the... So internet connection was apparently the biggest hurdle of this group. And we are talking about people who are normally online. That's good. Okay. Thank you. So what we'll do is that we'll post these responses onto the Cill platform so that you can have an idea of what were the issues that people who were online, what they faced. Perhaps we could do like a small analysis with this. Thank you, everyone.
I think
Let's go to the next. Yeah, we go to the next one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, okay. Thanks. Okay. So what hinders innovation at your school, at your institution? What would you say? Was it at the institution? Was it from home, working from home? Workload, yes. Unrealistic expectations, lack of support, Teacher motivation, resistance to change. Traditional approaches. Lack of imagination, yes, I agree. Agency to initiate innovation. University racing to improve rankings. Yeah. So these are more of, you know, problems also. Mhm. So again, workload seems to be a major issue. Recordings, reluctance to change, fear of being bullied. Oh, okay. Lack of IT skills. Mhm. The leadership is also target metrics, league tables, lack of investment, such as Zoom, learning management systems, yes. Okay, I think we can go to the next question, Vidhi, thank you. What promotes now innovation at your institution? Yeah. So what type of leadership would that be? Good leadership, thank you. Flexibility. Collaboration, yes. Value of creativity, yes. Recognition. Entrepreneurial leadership. Merci, Robina. For mentoring. Okay. I think we can, yeah, okay, fine. So I think we have more hurdles than perhaps promotion of innovation abilities. Collegiality. Thank you. Let's go next. Addition to my CV. Wow. Okay. So what are some areas that we should focus research on? And this would be something that perhaps would give the panel some ideas and perhaps some areas where we could have some more discussion and probe more. So could we have your views on what areas of research do you think in Mauritius or in the other countries, what should we be focusing on? Okay. I've just received an email from some of our students who couldn't join in because they had online classes to conduct. So I guess having recordings is going to also help, but to what extent? To what extent are the viewings on the MBC channels, to what extent are they helpful? I think we touched upon that when Goshen was presenting also. What should be improved? Professor Jack Whitehead's influences also maybe something that we could really touch upon, and what really influences learning, what really influences teacher motivation or teacher ability to reach students in meaningful ways. Mental health, yes, definitely. We should look at teachers' mental health, especially with the big battle that they have won to not have classes in person, but rather online. So just to give you all a bit of context, all our classes have moved online as from today. Yesterday was a free day for teachers to start organizing themselves. And so yes, COVID-19 is a reality and it is impacting on our education system. Great. So values-led research, stakeholders on use, online pedagogy. Mental health is the biggest one. Empowerment, inclusive education, staff development. Okay, great. I think that's it. Is there a last question, Vicky? I think we've finished, right? So we don't take too much of our time and we've got...
I think there's one more question.
We've got 20 minutes.
I think,
Sorry, is
Sandy,
that-
it's
finished?
I think it's already 2:39.
Yes,
so,
yes. We can
need
finish.
to.
That's what I'm saying. We're finishing it. Thank you for participating. Thank you. Okay, so can you stop sharing? Thank you. Great. Okay, so we'll now invite our panelists to start presenting about their work, their research areas, their directions for research that you think we can eventually, focus on. I'll leave the floor in alphabetical order to Karen. So Karen, you've got the floor. You've got 5 to 10 minutes to. Do you want to play the recording, Karen, or would you want to speak?
If you can play the recording, that would be great.
Okay.
Then I can come in maybe later, during the
Yeah.
discussion, but I think the video would be fine. Thanks.
Okay, great.
If
Thank
the
you,
quality is good enough, you'll tell me.
Yeah.
Just give me a minute. I'm going to open it.
Okay, so then could we just take
No, it's
Professor
okay.
Whitehead?
No,
It's okay?
it's fine.
Yeah? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay. Meanwhile, you could start typing in the chat sessions. Okay, so we'll listen to Karen. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Karen Ferreira-Meyers, and I'm really happy to be with you this afternoon. Thank you to the organizers for inviting me for this wonderful panel meeting. So the brief for the panel meeting was basically to think about what new directions there can be in research in or on educational technologies. So with that brief in mind, I pose myself the question, so what is happening today? In which direction should we go? What should we be thinking about? What should we be doing research on? So the objective of this little talk is to point to possible future and further research, and in that way also identify key aspects of education and educational technologies. And I want us to have in mind the idea of 21st century skills and the idea of life skills, one of which is flexibility, and I will come back to that one. The other one is leadership. I know some of you are students in leadership, so educational leadership, so important. So my short talk is organized in this way. 5 themes is what I looked for: flexibility and multimodality, lifelong learning, self-directedness, professional development, and then the changing roles of a university. And in particular, I'm thinking of quality assurance. So what flexibility, of course, when we look at online learning, flexibility is a key word. It's a buzzword. Flexibility can be seen in different, under different representations. Flexible learning as efficient practice, flexible learning as the means of gaining a competitive edge, over other universities or other countries, for example. Flexible learning as achieving equity, and flexible delivery, in particular the use of educational technology and ICTs. So flexibility has to do with when, where, and at what pace and how this can happen for all stakeholders involved. So it's learner-centered, encouraging greater independence and autonomy on the part of the learner. So the idea is to increase learners' access to and control over particular teaching and learning environments. Now, multimodality has to do with different modes, different ways, different manners of interacting. And a multimodal message can be delivered through video, as we are doing here, but also with photos, audio alone. We can use music and arts to convey a message. We can use text, as we have been done for a very long time. We can use visual graphs, charts, and various interactive components. So that is another area where a lot of research needs to be done. We've already been able to identify the benefits of lifelong learning. Now we need to find out, how do we put this in place? How do we ensure that people understand these benefits and really want to go for lifelong learning? So that's another area where we could be doing more research. Recently, I've been looking at self-directed learning, which is actually an approach where learners gradually assume personal responsibility and control of both cognitive and contextual processes. So it has to do with self-monitoring, self-management, ownership of learning, extension of what we have already learned, by adding, applying learning in new context, but also learning beyond the curriculum. So I think that is another area where more research is really, really necessary. Now, all that can only happen if it goes hand in hand with professional or staff development for flexible education, yes, but also for getting learners to become self-directed, to remain flexible. Am I, as an instructor, am I, as a learner, flexible enough, to go with the flow, to adapt to the new situations? And one of these situations has definitely been the COVID-19. So I like the cat saying, as long as everything's exactly the way I want it, I'm totally flexible, meaning I'm not flexible at all. And I really want us to research what makes people flexible, what allows flexibility in a curriculum, in a university, in an institution, in a person, an individual as such. So then we need to look at the changing roles of universities. And I think, again, COVID-19 has shown us that we really need to keep on thinking about that. There's been a disruption, a major disruption. And we might think we are now again in a relative stability because that first wave, disruptive wave, really shook us. And we've now come to the conclusion that, we need to analyze the impact. We need to recalibrate, and we need to keep on evolving. And evolving can only happen if we learn from what has gone before us, if we research on what is there, what is lacking, what is needed when it comes to infrastructure, when it comes to pedagogy, when it comes to forms of delivery, and again, flexibility, self-directedness, those are all are coming together. And the last little point is quality assurance, because if we look at how the role of the university is changing, we need to also make sure that that we assure the quality of whatever we are doing, of those new roles we are taking on. So in conclusion, I could have spoken about many other things: equity, social justice, virtual realities, artificial intelligence, learning analytics, but I know some of the colleagues here will do a much better job at that than me. I focused on five elements where we need to do more research in order to ensure a brighter future: flexibility and multimodality, lifelong learning, self-directedness, professional development, and the changing roles of universities with its quality assurance. So that was the little contribution I wanted to make this afternoon. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to our discussions later on. Bye for now.
Great. Thank you, Karen. So I'll now call upon, I hope you've all been taking good notes. These are very interesting areas. I'll now talk to Professor Paul Prinsloo to come in and just talk to us about what he's doing in his research and what areas we should be focusing on. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone. Just two introductory remarks. I think what COVID-19 has shown for us is what we consider the normal pre-COVID was anything but normal. Before COVID-19, we just accepted that everyone had access or could get access to the internet. Though some students had issues, we thought that all staff had access to the internet and hardware. We thought all staff had the necessary skills. So our research should firstly arise from an understanding that the period before COVID-19 was anything but normal. So that's a first introductory remark. The second remark is that the second danger in making the imaginary of a new normal normative and just accept it as a new normal is that we cannot and we should not accept, for example, the longer hours that staff work from home. That's not normal. We cannot talk about the new normal. It's abnormal. We cannot accept the erosion of office hours, the relentless working schedules of many of our staff working from early morning to late at night, including weekends, as a new normal. It is abnormal, and we should stop using the phrase the new normal. It cannot and it should never be normal. We cannot accept as a new normal the fact that technologies like Zoom takes us into the private spaces of our students, spaces they often share with family members and extended family members in rooms they may not be comfortable to show to an international audience. It's not normal. And then the third point about this new abnormal normal is the burnout that many staff experience balancing family and work, like from private spaces of their home, responding to student crisis all of the times of the day, often with very little support from the university's ICT, HR, finance, and general admin department. It's not normal. It should not be the new normal. Okay, with that rant out of the way, so what are the new directions for research? Personally, I would love us to move away from researching student and staff perceptions of the use of technology. Really, if I have to review another article about staff perceptions about, student perceptions about the use of mobile learning, I think I'll die. We should rather engage with how staff and students use technologies. How they perceive these technologies is like them waiting for Wakanda or whatever. Perceptions doesn't tell us anything. We should really, really engage with how staff and students use technologies. That's the first thing. Second thing, there's 8 things. Second thing is we should move beyond the adoption of technologies and rather focus on what enabling conditions should be in place for a particular technology to be adopted. We research about how students adopt technology, how lecturers adopt technology. Technology is part of our teaching and learning environment. We beyond should we, shouldn't we not. We should rather ask, what are the enabling conditions that should be in place for students and staff to use a particular technology? The third thing is the emphasis in our research should not be on technologies per se, but rather be on what pedagogical problems or issues we can address by using a particular technology. For me, that's a major shift. It's as if there's a new technology and now we want to research the technology and how we can use it. For me, it's upside down. We should rather say pedagogy should be the starting point. What are the problems in our pedagogical scenarios and strategies that we grapple with, and then say what technologies can address that problem. The fourth issue I want to put on the table, in an online connected world where students can often find the answers to their assignments on the internet, how does this change assessment? What types of assessment is needed in our interconnected world? And what type of competencies do staff and students need not only to survive in an interconnected world, but to flourish? I think that was the biggest concern in my own context from the University of South Africa, where we moved 380,000 students to an online exam. What type of knowledge can one evaluate, and should one evaluate in an authentic environment in an online space? The fifth point is the use of student data. That's my passion. As institutions become increasingly digitalized and datafied, we have access to more student data than before, but that doesn't give us a right just to use. So how can we use this resource ethically and responsibly to increase the effectiveness of our teaching, learning, and student support? Point 6 is, I think Frank has mentioned that, and thank you, Frank, for your presentation. We need to think low bandwidth and asynchronous whenever we can. Many students don't have access to high bandwidth and synchronous sessions, and we must, almost low bandwidth and asynchronous opportunities should be the standard and not the go-to. Seventh point is we cannot and should not research educational technologies outside of an institutional ecosystem. Using educational technologies in teaching, learning, and student support is entangled in the quality and effectiveness of HR, ICT, admin, pedagogy, curriculum, and everything else. We should be very careful that technology can solve all of our issues. So in our researching of educational technology, we should take care of the ecosystem. And lastly, if I may, one pertinent issue is that we need a counter narrative from moving away from quality as excellence to quality as equity. I think that's very important. We need to change the conversation to say it may be excellent, but is it equitable? Thank you so much for the engagement.
Wow, thank you, Paul. I think it was super interesting, especially as we're working a lot on assessment for learning rather than assessment of learning. I think this is the area where we are also going to. I'll not stop the momentum. Let's listen to Professor Frank Rennie, and we'll come back with, I hope, a lot of questions.
Thanks, Sandy. Well, I just put in the chat 2 excellent presentations. I really liked Karen's analysis of that. I think I was sitting here watching it and thinking of another point, and then she said it. So I think I was communicating by telepathy to get all those points in. That was really inspiring, Karen, and I think it was really, really useful. And then I was going to major on that one, but then Paul came in with this barnstormer, and I can't see anything to disagree with what you said there. It was really, really reinforcing from a different perspective, from a slightly different tangent on the issue. So rather than repeat all that, I would like to just pull some things out of there. One of the things is that I constantly do with colleagues. So when I'm faced with what I call the refuseniks, the people who refuse to change in the institution, the people who say that are wedded to the fact that what they have done all this time is the way to do it, because that's how they learned when they went to university. I say, you know, and they say, oh, how do you do this face to face? How do you do that face to face? How do you do that online? How do you do this online? I turn it around and say, I don't know, how do you do it face to face? Because almost all of their criticisms about online access are equally true of face-to-face access. And because we've been doing that for hundreds of years, we find ways round that. So we feel, so if a student misses a face-to-face lecture, then they probably get the lecture notes from one of their friends. They just copy these things through. There's a system how they get access to these things. So we've found ways to go around and we go through. I found it quite hard going listening to your Mentimeter, some of the questions there. What were the biggest difficulties you faced? Because I feel very privileged. My transition during the pandemic carried on without a blip. It was exactly, the only difference, I didn't have to drive to the campus to do it. I did it from here. And it wasn't expected of me as a senior academic to be seen on campus because everybody else was online and everybody else is at a distance. I know that some of my colleagues had difficulties because they had children at home and a whole range of other issues. And as you know, Paul mentioned some of them there. I think that is very true. We need to find ways around that technology. I loved in a ways of future research. I think if we're serious about putting the student at the center of education and making education appropriate for people with different needs and with different aspirations and different hopes for what they use education for, then we have to encourage this pedagogy. We have to encourage this self-directed education. I tell students in the classes right at the start of my modules there, if you've come here to learn, if you've come here seriously wanting an education, then I will bend over backwards to help you. If you're coming here just because you want to tick the box and you're told to go to university and you're told, then don't waste my time. Don't waste my time. Go somewhere else. Go to somebody else's class, yeah? Because you really you have to have that hunger for learning, that hunger for education. And if you have that, then I will do what I can to help you and to find the resources. And I think the role of the lecturer, the role of the academic in teaching space is changing hugely now. And it's not about, I mean, I think it was Paul, I can probably both of you actually said, about the need to, identifying resources and everything's out on the internet anyway to find things. You can find examples of lectures, examples of assessments and essays, and I've been downloading PhD thesis over the pandemic and for working on other books and so on and so forth. It's all out there. What the changing role for us as an educator is to find these things and to direct students towards them. We may have to create our own. We may have to do our own videos or our own, write our own books. I've written a lot of these books behind me. In terms of putting the stuff through, we may have to create that, but it may also be there already. And what we need to do is to identify these things and signpost. Yes, curate them, exactly. Put these things through so that people can find them and recognize quality when they see it. We grow up, for example, the example I often use with students is you grow up in a family learning about a good quality newspaper and a terrible newspaper. Oh, that's just the local rag. You don't, that's a right wing or a left wing or a this or that. And so you learn from your society, from your parents and your relations around you, what is a good publication and what is a bad publication. Because the internet is so new, then we haven't learned that discipline yet. We're still trying to use a 21st century technology with 19th century manners. I still get emails from people occasionally that start with saying, "Dear Frank," and they're like, as if they were writing a letter, and yet it's an immediate form of communication. One of my colleagues stopped me in the corridor about a year or so ago there and said, that was the shortest email I've ever had it was from me. And I said, oh, really? Why? He'd asked me a question and he said, yes or no, Y or N? And so I replied, D, because he's Donald, Y, F for Frank. Just do it, you know, D, yes, Donald, yes, do it. And so that immediacy, that ability to drop in, as we saw in the presentation today, when two different people were just calling me, they'll be wondering why I'm not responding, because, you know, we get in the habit of just actually making a video call and having a quick 5-minute chat with somebody and solving an issue and moving on and that sort of stuff there. We do that, you know, as part of our institution, we do that as an internal call. It's not even, we don't even pay local call rates for it. It's internal to the system. And I think this idea of asking, what is the purpose of education? Why do we want that education? Is it just to get a new job? Is it for personal satisfaction? Is it to change the way we think in these things, to innovate, or for happiness? You know, and that is directly related to the purpose of the university. What are universities for? They're there. In one of the classes that I do, I talk about unbundling of the university. So the university brings together in a big bundle education, tuition, examination, certification, prestige and merits award and so on. All of these things, they go through a traditional course. In the future, I think people will want to unbundle this and say, actually, and we're seeing it already. We're seeing it already. We're seeing people who go onto YouTube to look at lectures because they're better than the lectures they get in the class. Okay, but then they have to go and do an assessment. They have to go and do an exam at my local university. Actually, what we're seeing now is people who are registered for a course in one place, but getting online resources from somewhere else and doing the assessment at a third place. They might want local contact and local tuition with maybe some sort of coaching with problem issues, and that might be a fourth place. And so we will see a day, I think not too far away, where people will roll up and say, I want to do your degree course. I don't want you to teach me. I think I know enough about this already. Just give me the exams. Just give me the exams. I'll pay for the exam and I sit the exam. If I pass, I get it. Whether I've not, I've come to your class. And this is quite a challenging idea. This is quite a challenging for academics who are not short of their own ego, who like to be on the stage and feel that they're important. When I first moved our early degree programs online in the early 90s, the first thing we noticed that many students stopped coming to the classes, stopped coming to the lectures. Why? Because why were they going to drive for an hour to come to the campus and go for a lecture when they could get it online? And so some of my colleagues really said, well, this is terrible. They're stopping coming to classes. And I say, well, they're stopping coming to classes because they're not getting anything out of it. They're boring. You know, you're boring them. And so rather than actually take offense at that, why not give them the stuff online to learn in their own time and have your face-to-face as problem-solving sessions where you can really get interactive learning on the job and, you know, raising a particular question, putting it back. And so we changed the idea from lectures to tutorials that were much more interactive. And so that's learning a new way of doing things, a new etiquette for how we do things. And actually, we got more and more students. And the students became from further afield, places that they could not actually travel to the college to do these things. I have students in Canada, I have students in Asia who are studying these things online as if they were in the same room as me. Yeah. And having done that, they then have a huge potential for what they can then do when they leave here, because their purpose for learning is different from the other person in the room. They have a different reason. So I think the research in the future we should be looking at is how do we actually maximize those educational opportunities that give the willing learner the chance to self-direct what they learn by providing them with a whole buffet of good quality resources. And we'll say, come to the buffet, take what you want, take what you need, not what I think you should get. All of these resources are good and they will help you. but you don't have to have them all. You don't have to have everything. Just eat what you want.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Frank. I'm sorry, we're just gonna have to, cut through and go to the next panelist because we are running out of time. But yeah, point taken, self-directed education, really getting students to maximize on their own strengths, definitely. Thank you so much. So I'll now leave the floor to Dr. Isabel Tarling, who is also my mentor. And we have worked a lot on a lot of papers together and open educational resources. So Isabel, as soon as you're ready.
There we go. Let me just show. So good afternoon. Sorry, I nearly had the wrong time zone. It's so great to be here and to hear all these fantastic ideas. For me, educational research and technologies can be grouped into 4 spaces. And as I've been listening to Karen and Paul and Frank talk, I see in my head how these can fit into the different spaces. And for me, the start of thinking around education technologies came from Tom Reeves's work when he was saying we need to stop researching things and start researching how people can change and innovate, and I like that, and the impact on people. So for me, education technology research and what everyone's been saying is around knowledge and skills and about competencies and cares, what we do with our minds, what we do with our hands, what we do with our hearts. How do we care for students who don't have equity? How do we who don't have equitable access? How do we help their minds to learn to use technologies? How do we help teachers' hands to learn to use technologies? The button training. So it's sometimes it is about the tool and researching how the tool works, but for me it's covered into a space of, it's not just the knowledge of using it and competencies, but how do we use it? Where does it fall? Where's the care in how we implement it? So it's not just an education neutral tool that we throw into a space, but we very much think around that whole space. And then in that space, we can talk about things like open pedagogy. We can talk about digital literacies, multimodality, learning those kind of ideas, learning about compassion and technologies and how the two can go hand in hand. Using Mahabali's ideas around pedagogies of care, well, not just hers, but lots of people, but you get my idea. And then I think around educational research around socially embedded innovation. And very often we think around innovation as someone in a clever space, sitting in a clever room with a lot of clever people and creating solutions that need to be implemented. And for me, education technology research is so much more. It's about saying, how do we empower users, teachers, students, school management boards, district education officers, everybody in the whole ecosystem? How do we empower them? How do we give them the skills to innovate their own practice, to innovate with the tools that they have already available? How do we get them to innovate their practice? How do we get them to innovate systems and processes? And how do they feel in that space that they have the agency and the reciprocity to do what they want to achieve? And then also thinking around the process, and do we use design thinking? Do we use a design thinking co-design process so that there is someone who has some expert ideas and knowledge that comes alongside and supports that socially embedded innovation? And for me, that also talks a lot to how do we, and it moves on to the next area, is these innovations. I've got a book called how to change when change is hard. And in there, they talk about bright spots. And now if we found these bright spots, these innovation hubs in different areas, in different schools, classrooms, university classrooms, education departments, these are these bright spots. How do we sustain change that happens? How do we understand the change in the process? How do we scale that change? And I'm not just talking here about taking one innovation and saying it can be spread all over and everybody must do the same thing, because then we fall back into that idea of clever people doing innovation and other people adopting it. It's very much like what Paul was saying around adoption. But how do we look at change? How do we understand change longitudinally? Because there's lots of ideas of people doing, or lots of studies of studying how things were before and how things were at the end. And there's fewer studies around capturing the complexity and the messiness and the backwards and forward movement of changes that happen as part of innovations, and also looking at scaling solutions and understanding how scaling works in the magnitude of the impact, in the variety of impact as scaling happens, and how to sustain that impact over time and how to achieve equity of impact. And then lastly, for me, education research needs to look at how do we research the research? How do we think metacognitively? How do we think about ontologies and epistemologies, about how we understand knowledge and how that feeds into our methodologies, and how we understand knowing and how that feeds into how we would frame different approaches. So it's the research about research and research processes that brings this four together, and saying that as researchers, how do we support these different areas? How do we support new knowledge being created in these areas? And how do we go forward to make this knowledge available, not just to the inner circle, but to the practitioners who need it, the practitioners who need to apply what they want to use in their spaces? And that's just my thinking.
Great. Thank you so much, Isabel. I think there's a lot to think about from the questions that you're asking, and definitely the care-based learning has to be there for people to care, to actually, you know, to actually want to go forward. And I've been receiving a few messages offline, and students have had to leave because they have water problems at home. So eventually, you know, you want to be also present academically, professionally, but then there are realities that we have to be taken care of. Great. Thank you so much, Isabel. We have tons of ideas from all of you, and it's been really great. And I really want to have some time for debate, so or for discussion, not debate, sorry. So I will just listen to Professor Jack Whitehead. So Professor, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I'd really like to share my screen. So I'm hoping that this screen share actually comes up. Can we just check?
No worries. Yeah, it's starting.
It's there.
Great.
Yeah?
Perfect.
Oh, that's great.
Great.
Okay, what I'm going to focus on in terms of this idea of the educational technology and the kind of future is on something that actually takes forward, I hope, what Isabel was talking about, and also Paul and the other speakers. When I gave my presidential address to the British Education Research Association 30 years ago, those are the questions that I was determined to try and follow up. And that's what I've been doing over the last 30 years. And I'd like to be accountable to you for answering the questions that I've been asking here, which is, right, have you got any evidence that you've had an educational influence, if you like, in your own learning, in the learning of others, and in particular in the learning of the social formations that influence your practice and understandings? And what I'd like to emphasize is the importance of putting the I within the research question, the educational research question, in terms of how am I improving what I'm doing in my continuing professional development. Now, that isn't to say that, if you like, the we questions aren't important. They are, because we'll only have a global influence by doing things collectively. But I don't want the I to get lost in the we, because often when you hear a we question, the I has not been taken seriously. And so what I want to emphasize is that point about the how do I improve what I'm doing in my professional practice, in my continuing professional development, are very important educational research questions. And in particular, I want to show you where I am now using educational technology to develop that kind of research. And you'll see on the What's New section of the website, I just want to highlight these resources that you can access, but not only as resources, but also my own accountability for actually putting forward explanations of educational influences, not only in my own learning, but in the learning of others. And if you look at, for example, you've got the current issue of the Educational Journal of Living Theories. You've got living theory posters from all over the world, where groups of people who are willing to explain their educational influences in learning are using the technology to actually communicate the results of their knowledge creation. And I want to back up Paul's point that he pointed out about perception, that I too got really fed up with just looking at perceptions rather than the educational influences in the use of the technology as we try to improve our practice. And you'll see here, this successful symposium proposal has been accepted for April 2022 for the American Education Research Association, which is focusing on cultivating equitable education systems for the 21st century. And I want you to, if you like, if you would, at some point, you can actually access the successful proposal from this year, which was presented in April 2021 on accepting educational responsibility. And if you click on this particular symposium, you will see that there are 5 of us. You've got people from Canada, the UK, Nepal, you've got actually people with India, you've got the USA, and they're all using educational technology to communicate the meanings of the knowledge that they're creating as they show what it means to accept an educational responsibility for improving their practice and having an educational influence in relation to their students. And so this is something that I would like to see, if you like, when I know that Paul was against, if you like, the idea of the new normal. But what I've noticed with the use of this technology is that in the past, my university would spend £2,500 for me to attend and present at AARA. Now, what this new technology has enabled us to do is for £140 for all of the people that are presenting in the symposia to actually present at the American Education Research Association. I hope I'm making sense here, because it makes it more equitable now in terms of sharing the knowledge. A group of researchers from Mauritius who could not afford to get over for that kind of international and global research association can now actually present. And I've been arguing that it should now be a normal opportunity in these major conferences to also present virtually. And if you go down the What's New section of the web page, you'll see that there are presentations that have already been given at Durban University of Technology, about the annual conference of the British Education Research Association. This is a lovely one, the Association of Teacher Education in Europe. And again, you've got the Action Research Network of the Americas. You've got here, ARNA, the Action Research, co-creating knowledge in mentoring, and co-creating knowledge and empowering communities through living educational research. Now, all of these on the What's New section are available for you to actually critique and see if there's anything useful there in terms of these resources. And it's vital in this kind of educational research that you focus on values, because education is a values-laden practical activity. And if you claim to be having an educational influence, you really do have to demonstrate that you've had an influence not only in learning, which lots of people have been stressing today, but also that the learning is with values, in my language, of human flourishing, whether it's social justice, whether it's responsibility, whether it's care, whether it's freedom. You've got to link the learning to actually values of human flourishing, because history is full of examples of where individuals and cultures have learnt things which actually are dehumanizing and actually sometimes support crimes against humanity. So I would urge you all not only to use the word learning, but also to ensure that there's an educational influence in learning with values of human flourishing. And this is where the multimedia technology is vital, because if you will videotape what you do in your educational practice, you can clarify and communicate the meanings of the unique constellation of values that help to constitute who you are and provide you with the explanatory principles that you can use in your explanations of educational influence. And that's why I love this technology. I was given the camera, first of all, in 1972 as a head of science, and I was able to turn it on myself and study my own practice. And I discovered myself as a living contradiction, because I thought I got inquiry learning going with my pupils, and I could see clearly that I was subtly giving my pupils all the questions. And that was very powerful for me, to not believe what I actually think I'm doing, to check it with other people, to get the visual evidence, actually put that visual data in evidence-based explanations of educational influence. And that's been, for me, one of the most powerful influences of the technology. So I'm just hoping you will access this web page with all of the resources. And I'll just point to these. There are over 50 living theory doctorates here on the left that are people like ourselves that have explained our educational influences in our own learning and actually successfully submitted them for doctoral theses. And that is with the I question, how do I improve my practice? Okay, I'll stop there. And I do hope you'll connect with me with any responses that you'd like me to take up. Okay, thank you.
Excellent, Jack. We left the best for last, I think. Great. So I don't think we have any questions. Are there any questions from the floor? From anybody who would want to perhaps ask about what practices they have been, okay, on a self-reflection. Yes, definitely. Okay, Paul. Yeah, we will be closing also. Okay, so Rubina says that some teachers hide behind technology, as dealing with students is making them uncomfortable. But we should now be reaching to the student and the person behind the screen, and the future is human. Yeah, totally agree. Perhaps we could hear from some of the staff from university. Any ideas, any pointers about their own practice that they would like to clarify, perhaps in terms of technology, in terms of pedagogical approaches? No.
Okay. I don't think we have many who've with us.
No, we still have 37 participants.
No, but
yeah.
academics from the university, I don't know.
We have a few.
We have? Yeah, we have. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, I guess it's a lot of information that we need to take in, and a lot of information that we need to process in terms of who are the real people who are teaching, and who are the real people who are receiving the type of education that we're giving to them. And eventually the research is pointing towards more care-based learning, more thinking of uncomfortable truth.
Could I just make one quick point, Sandy?
Yes, yes, please do. Please
And
do.
it's just a general point for all of us, I think. I think we have to change the language that we use to talk about this. I think we have to take the argument, take the fight to that. So for example, I mentioned in the chat about not calling them virtual students, and don't call it the virtual learning environment. It's a real learning environment. It just happens to be online. They are not virtual students, they are real students. I also have a campaign against the use of the word remote, because people use remote all the time when they're not really remote. You know, I'm doing a lot of talks just now about being remote, and I live in the northwest corner of the Northwest Island in the northwest part of Europe, right on the edge of the sea. And people say, "Oh, isn't it remote?" And I say, "Remote from what? Everything I want is here." Actually, you're remote from me. You're the one that's remote. I gave a talk in London and said, "Thank you for inviting me to this remote location." And they all laughed. And I said, no, seriously, it took me 2 days to get here. You know, so I think we have to take the argument to them and say, you're not remote. It's not remote learning if you're learning in place. So it's about redefining those terms. So because people talk about them in a very pejorative manner, as if it's second class or third class, and it's not. And we are actually complicit in that, because we use the language that they've given us to talk about that, and we need to challenge that in many occasions, I think.
Great. So Maria Huxtable, most of the language used today has been of learning. Biesta pointed out we need to develop a language of education. Yes.
Frank, I really like that point you were making, and I find George Felicianus's thinking around emerging technologies and what do we mean by emerging technologies to be a really good starting point to think through that, where he's talking about the way technologies go through a hype cycle, but not just talking about the tool, but also about the thoughts and how thoughts are can be considered as emerging technologies, and that its pedagogies are emerging technologies. So it's not just around the tool that we use in the class and how we construct that idea. So yeah, I like that very much.
Okay. Paul has to leave, I think. Karen, any last words? Anything you want to bounce back on?
Yes, I think, I mean, what I wanted to say is that there's been great points and ideas, you know, raised, and I really hope that whoever was here will take something back and use it to develop new research projects and you know, continue working with all these ideas, because I think a lot has been said. It's been really, really great.
Yeah. Extraordinary. Great. It's been a very, very rich session, and we're very, very grateful to all of you to have shared so much of yourselves with everyone who was here and participating. We have a lot of students from Seychelles, like I said, and also from Mauritius, and they will be now embarking on their dissertations. So definitely a lot of these ideas should be perhaps operationalized, and perhaps next year we have a bigger presentation of the students and what they are working on. And so I guess, do we close? Dorothy, you want to give the...
Yeah. Okay. So I think...
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. So can you all hear me? Yeah. Okay. So I think we've reached the end of our research half day. Well, it went a bit beyond the time that we planned, but I guess it was, I mean, I personally was delighted to hear from all of our colleagues here. And I wish to thank all our speakers on behalf of Cill. And hopefully we get to collaborate on several research projects and other enriching discussions. And I think there have been lots of pertinent areas for research, for discussion, for reflections that have been highlighted by each of you. And we hope that our students present here today have, well, even though not many of them shared their thoughts, maybe they are thinking about how, for example, during their online class, we are maybe we're just purging into their privacy and all, and they're hiding behind computers. So I think teachers, all of us educators, as well as the students, they need to have a major role to play in terms of showing, as I said, as Frank just said, if you're not here to really interested, then you don't need to be here. You can learn differently. So Frank, while you were telling that, I was thinking about students just in the presentation hearing about that. So I just did not want to make any comments, but anyway, so I again thank all of you to have spared from your busy schedule to have spared some time and have been really, really great in responding to my frequent emails and have been really involved in that. So I hope all our attendees here are taking from this session some interesting ideas. And this was eye-opening for me, and which I hope it was for all of you here, all of us here. Okay, so we close the session here, and I wish you all good evening or good day, and stay safe. And we hope to meet again, not virtually, online, Frank, online. Okay, so a big clap to all of you.
Much closer. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye. Bye. Thank you so much, everyone.
Okay.
Hello?
Yeah.
Stop recording.
Well, I think when I end it, it's going to stop here. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Edu, for joining. Piano.